Hello, this is Mike Shearer, Executive Editor of the Columbus Dispatch and Dispatch.com. Welcome to another edition of From the Editor. We talk to Columbus Dispatch reporters about their Sunday cover stories for our print edition and online. This week we have Shahid Meighan with us, who's our night breaking news reporter, who has ventured off to his normal duties for a bit here recently to work on this week's cover story, which is about ShotSpotter. And I'll have Shahid explain that to you here in a second what ShotSpotter is. But first of all, Shahid, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad you're here. Tell us a little bit about the night breaking news reporter here at the Dispatch and Dispatch.com. What does that mean? What do you do every night? Just so we have some idea of what your job is.
Sure. So I think me and my editor, Jim Wilhelm, have kind of come up with a way of describing it as just covering the chaos. So whatever comes in, whatever comes into the night that other reporters are not here to help out on, I'm usually on it. A lot of it has to do with, unfortunately, like homicides, fatal car crashes, fires, those type of things. A lot of what I do is just listen to the police scanner all day or all night, really, and just pick up on what's happening out there in Columbus, whether it's a shooting, again, a car accident, people doing strange things downtown, that type of stuff. So it's really just me listening and being like, I guess, a fly on the wall, so to speak.
Yeah, but it also involves like covering some night meetings and things like that. And
that stuff too.
Other stories that come up later in the day too.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yep. The typical city council meetings that can be kind of boring, but can also be very interesting. Yeah. Just it's a wide range. So
the unexpected late day news, basically. Yeah. So that we expect to happen, I guess. All right. Well, thank you. So this story is about ShotSpotter, and this came from you here. So kind of tell us about the origin of the idea, and then maybe we should explain what ShotSpotter is first, perhaps.
Sure. So ShotSpotter, in short, is a gunshot detection system that's in place throughout over 100 U.S. cities, including here in Columbus. We've had it since 2019. So the way it works is that there are hidden microphones in certain Columbus neighborhoods, and these microphones are set up to detect gunshots, right? So once someone fires a gun, the microphones triangulate the location and they send it to employees who work at an incident review center over in California. They review the audio from that shot and then they send it over to Columbus police for them to review for themselves. Those in the exact location, even like where specifically it was. Like if it was like behind a house, in front of a house, in an alley. It's pretty interesting stuff.
Pretty specific stuff.
Yeah.
So using technology to find out where gunfire has occurred. And in your story, talk about like roughly 80% of gunfire in the United States is never reported to police for whatever reason.
Yeah. So different reasons for that. People, especially in communities of color, just don't really trust the police. That's just the fact that it is what it is.
Yeah.
Other times people are just like really used to it. It doesn't register that, it's a gunshot. So there are a myriad of reasons, but those are like some of the two main ones.
So what got you interested in writing the story and researching this topic?
Yeah, so like I said, I listened to the scanner a lot. And so one night, I don't think this was a fatal shooting. I think it was just someone firing off a gun. But in any case, I called about it, asking about it. And at that time, I knew what ShotSpotter was. I knew how it worked. Yeah. And I was just curious. I said, what's this ShotSpotter thing? And the dispatcher, and I quote, he said, no, ShotSpotter is useless. And then he hung up. And I was like, oh, interesting. So out of that, I did a little bit more digging, realized that there's more to ShotSpotter as far as a controversy and whether or not it's as effective as the police and the people who sell technology make it out to be. So I figured it was worth looking into.
Okay, so we'll talk about your scavenger hunt looking for ShotSpotter in a minute. But first of all, so it's in 4 neighborhoods in Columbus right now. I have it right here. The Linden area, Hilltop neighborhoods, Parsons Avenue quarter on the south side, and in Near East neighborhood, and also Wedgwood apartments. So it's really 4 areas in an apartment complex.
Technically, yeah, I've been folding Wedgwood into the Hilltop area, but technically, yes, it's 5 different areas.
Okay. So what do police say about ShotSpotter here in Columbus, and does it help them?
Police have spoken very fondly about ShotSpotter, about how it's a good investigatory tool, how it can get officers there quicker. There was one instance, as you noted in the story, how it allowed them to respond to a toddler who had been shot in his house, a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
They were able to save that 2-year-old's life, and I think they would say it was partly because of ShotSpotter.
Because in that particular case, the story talks about how with a drive-by shooting, the house is in chaos after it happens, and the police, ShotSpotter, is notifying the police before anyone calls 911.
Yes, it was 90 seconds before, and that's when we were talking. That might not seem like a lot of time, but like with a gunshot victim and a 2-year-old at that's a long time. Yeah.
So in that case, it helps save lives. That's obviously
for sure
very valuable. The experts sometimes aren't as complimentary towards ShotSpotter. Let's talk about that. You have an expert from Ohio State, Terrence Hinton, a criminal justice and sociology professor. What do the critics say about ShotSpotter?
So Terrence Hinton, as well as other experts, have said that it can be a useful tool for police responding to gunfire and getting there faster, which of course that's important. But as far as impact, reducing gun violence, leading to arrests, seizures of weapons, that is not as strong. It's a good, one of the experts that I spoke with, Eric Peasley, said it was, there were good procedural benefits to ShotSpotter. But as far as like reducing gun violence and like getting to the root of it, ShotSpotter doesn't, according to them, ShotSpotter doesn't do that.
Okay. So you and Jim did an analysis here of the data from the city public safety department. And from between 22 and 2024 in Columbus, ShotSpotter issued 14,209 alerts. And about 2% of those cases resulted in arrests. Going back to that point, I mean, although solving 2% of this is not a bad thing, it's not perhaps terribly effective at it.
When you're talking about 2%, but also the amount of money that the city is spending on it. Again, I don't want to share my opinion, but it's like, I think
that's the question. That's the public policy question for cities.
Is it worth again the nearly $6 million that is earmarked so far on ShotSpotter? So, and that's for the people who make more than me to decide.
Police also recovered 175 firearms, which is not insignificant, but also, given the scope of what we've seen with homicides, et cetera, in Columbus, it's not a huge number either.
Correct.
Okay. So the cost, you mentioned that a minute ago. So this year, Columbus is going to pay about $886,000 for ShotSpotter for 12.6 square miles. The city would like to expand it, but it's expensive, obviously. But City Council just approved an extension for 3 years of some of the current areas at an increased price tag, not surprisingly. And as you said, it'll be $6 million by the time that extension expires in 2028. All right. So that's what the city's been spending on. And council just approved that increase. And you went to that meeting, and there was not really a discussion of it.
No, that kind of that surprised me a little bit. You would expect when we're talking about paying for a technology, especially policing technology, they would ask to see like how it's working, right? Like the pros and cons, that type of stuff. And the fact that there was no conversation, at least public conversation, to me was a little bit not super surprising, because I've heard chatter about that before about how they don't really like talk about things, but it was still like it was definitely noticeable that they didn't even discuss it.
So you also, for part of the story, you went out and spoke to a lot of people in the community about ShotSpotter. You had pros and cons for people. What's kind of the con of, from a citizen standpoint, that you heard from?
So one community activist I spoke with, Jasmine Ayers, who's been a great source. She said that she would like to see that money for ShotSpotter go toward more community initiatives. She mentioned the Columbus Police, the MCR, the Mobile Crisis Response Unit, for people having mental health crises, where they have, I think, like mental health professionals with the police come and assist them. She would like to see the money go towards those types of initiatives, more things that do get to the root of gun violence. Terrence Hinton kind of echoed the same thing. That money may be better spent towards just more community stuff, generally speaking, that can address crime and gun violence. Okay.
All right. And the con, or I'm sorry, the pro.
Yeah. So the community members, it was interesting. They had a general understanding about how ShotSpotter works, and they believed, I think in theory almost, that it could be a helpful thing for police. But a lot of them truthfully didn't know whether or not it was actually helping, which I thought was noteworthy, which is why I mentioned it in the story. I was noticing that, a lot of them said they think it's fine, they think it's cool for sure, but like whether or not it's actually helping, a lot of them honestly didn't know. Okay. Which again, it's a policing technology. This is to help community members. You would think that those community members would be kind of in on the loop, so to speak, as far as like whether or not it's actually helping. So the fact that they didn't know was interesting.
All right. So I think one of the interesting numbers you have in here is that from 2020 to 2024, obviously homicides have fluctuated, and in the post-COVID day, or during COVID and post-COVID days, we had some of our highest years for homicides, which would seem to suggest that ShotSpotter did not stop violence from happening.
And not only that, but again, around I think 80% of those were with firearms. So,
Well, yes. And I think there's even a good quote you have somewhere here from the FOP saying that they're not aware of anyone checking to see if any ShotSpotter microphones around before they fire the guns.
And I'm glad you brought that up. That was the main gripe with the story, was that the Department of Public Safety, Columbus Police, and officials at Sound Thinking, the company that sells ShotSpotter, they would not divulge the location of the microphones, which was difficult because again, I'm new to I'm obviously new to this story. I'm not 100% sure what these things look like. So the rationale of hiding them because they're afraid that people might try and disable them to me is kind of just ludicrous, all right? They have cameras that are visible on a lot of blocks in Wedgwood, for example. Nobody's messing with those. So this idea that if you tell the location of the microphones that people are going to go mess with it, it didn't make sense to me on this basis.
So for us to illustrate this, you went on a bit of a, as I mentioned earlier, scavenger hunt looking for locations, and it was took quite a while.
Quite a few, and I want to take this moment to give a shout out to Doro Chenoweth. He was amazing with the drones, taking photos for me. I called him out at least like 3 or 4 times. Trying to make sure I had the right photo. So thank you, Doro. But yes, a lot of what I was doing was just looking up, trying to figure out what was a ShotSpotter microphone versus just like a telephone pole or just a regular camera. Part of my research, I had to just look up other stories that other publications did and see the photos that they got to try and compare them. And thankfully, I was able to find the 2 that are in the story that look exactly like the ones that I found in other stories. So that was a huge finding.
Yeah, I remember the first conversation about that. We'll get the drone up there and take images of this, and Dora does a great job of that. But just finding them was difficult. So
yeah, it was. I went out on a Saturday. I was just really curious. This story was a bit of an obsession at one point. I was like, where are these microphones at? And so I went out one Saturday in the Wedgwood, and I found them just not by accident, but I was like, whoa, that's it right there. So definitely a bit of a scavenger hunt.
All right. Well, that you'll now illustrate that for our readers in the community, and they can see what that's about. One of your stories here also talks about what's happened in other parts of the country with ShotSpotter. Actually, I meant to ask you too. What the company Sound Thinking? What is their, I guess, pitch at this point in time about why it works? So,
to their credit, Sound Thinking has acknowledged that ShotSpotter is limited as far as like what it can and can't do. And I was kind of surprised at that. Thomas Chittum, the senior vice president of forensic sciences at Sound Thinking, he did say that ShotSpotter can be a tool, but it's just that, a tool. It's an expensive tool, of course, which is what everybody has said, but it's a tool nonetheless. So they stuck by their guns, no pun intended, that ShotSpotter is a useful tool for police, saving lives, et cetera, et cetera. So they kind of stuck by what they said in the past on that front.
Well, I mean, the mere getting police to scenes faster and being aware of what's happening and being able to pinpoint patrols. I mean, for example, if they see 5 shootings reported by ShotSpotter in a certain area, maybe increase patrols in that area. I mean, there certainly is some rational logic to that.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I guess my last question for you is, in a lot of other cities, Dayton and Canton, for example, have used ShotSpotter and gotten rid of it. You have a story running on Monday, too, about this that kind of gets into what's happened elsewhere. Can you describe that a little bit?
About this other cities having it? Yeah. So a lot of cities have tried out ShotSpotter and just said that it wasn't worth the money. A lot of them have cited underwhelming return on investment, so to speak, as far as reducing gun violence. A lot of them, again, found that police were able to get to the scenes quicker. But as far as even like recovering evidence, like shell casings and things like that, it just wasn't happening enough for them to justify the cost. I don't want to misquote myself, but I think it was Canton who said that it just wasn't worth the money.
You have here Canton and Dayton later banned the technology. Dayton chose not to renew because of cost and inability to prevent gun violence. Canton chose to part ways because of cost and instead established a replacement gunshot detection technology called Wi-Fi.
So a lot of cities have been trying out ShotSpotter. There were at least 3 cities in North Carolina. They tried it and decided to get rid of it because, again, the underwhelming effect was not worth the cost to them.
Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to see if your story spurs any debate in the community here about the future of ShotSpotter. And council does have other contracts that'll be coming up to extend in other parts of the parts that sit here in the future too.
Yes, for sure. The Wedgwood contract is up for renewal. I want to say next year.
Okay.
So we'll see how that goes if they decide that if it's really working. One other thing that we mentioned in the story too was that so the police have touted the decline in homicides and even Wedgwood too, the decline of crime in Wedgwood, but they're not mentioning ShotSpotter, which to me is very interesting. Again, they're spending so much money on it, but I mean, the fact that they're not even mentioning it when they're touting crime decreases, I think is worthy of note.
Well, they also made a big deal about the recent homicides of 2024, and never said ShotSpotter.
Nobody's mentioning ShotSpotter, so do with that what you will.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you for your story and your reporting on this and joining us today, and appreciate it.
Cool, thank you, appreciate it.
All right, until next week, we will wrap it up for today, and talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.